They had conquered 17 star systems. They had crushed civilizations that once ruled entire galaxies. They had never lost a war, and they had stopped counting how many species they had destroyed. So when their sensors detected a small metal ship drifting near an unknown planet, they did not feel fear. They felt hungry. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory. He was tall, even for a. His skin stretched over a thin frame, and his 4 eyes glowed with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. Behind him, 12 warships waited for his command. Each one could destroy a moon. "What is that thing?" asked, pointing at the ship on his display screen. Scholar moved closer to examine the data. She was smaller than the warriors around her, and her job was to study new species before the Dominion destroyed them. She looked at the readings and made a small sound of amusement. "It appears to be a vessel, High Commander," she said. "Made of basic metals, iron, steel, some kind of primitive alloy, no plasma shields, no particle weapons. Their energy signature suggests they use chemical fuel for propulsion." Laughed. The sound echoed across the bridge, and his officers laughed with him. "Chemical fuel? Are they animals?" "Unknown, High Commander, but their technology is perhaps 200 cycles behind our own, maybe more." Sub-Commander stepped forward. He was second in command, and unlike his superior, he sometimes felt the uncomfortable feeling of caution. "Perhaps we should scan them more carefully before we approach. We know nothing about this species." Waved his hand dismissively. "What is there to know? Look at them, their ship is broken. Half their hull is damaged. They are drifting in empty space with no support. This will not be a battle. This will be a mercy killing." He pressed a button on his command chair. "Open a channel. Let us speak to these creatures before we end them." The communication officer worked quickly, and soon the bridge was filled with static. Then a voice came through. It was rough and strange, speaking in broken trade language. "This is the Republic warship. State your intentions." Smiled. The word meant nothing to him, just sounds from a dying species. "Creature of the unknown vessel," said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "I am High Commander of the Dominion. You are now in Dominion space. You will power down your weapons, open your hull, and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will become servants of the Dominion. Your ship will become scrap. You have 1 cycle to comply. If you do not, you will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation." He cut the channel before they could respond. Then he turned to his officers and spread his arms wide. "You see, this is how it always happens. They hear our name, they feel our power, and they surrender. By tomorrow, we will have new slaves and new metal for our forges." Scholar was still looking at her data. Something bothered her, but she could not say what. "High Commander, their ship appears to be damaged from recent combat. They were fighting someone before we found them." "And they lost," obviously said, "which means they are weak, which means this will be easy." On the broken ship called, Captain Ho listened to the alien's message. He stood in the center of his bridge, surrounded by sparking consoles and flickering lights. The ship had barely survived a battle with raiders 3 days ago. They had lost 60 crew members. Their engines were dying. Their weapons were damaged. And now 12 alien warships had them surrounded. Lieutenant looked up from her tactical station. "Captain, I count 12 hostile vessels. Their weapons are unlike anything in our database. Energy signatures suggest they could destroy us in a single volley." Chief Engineer Park's voice crackled over the intercom from below. "Sir, I have maybe 30% power to give you. Shields are gone. Forward cannons are offline. We have rear guns and missiles. That is all." Ensign Lee, the young communications officer, was pale. "Sir, I translated their message. They want us to surrender. They called us creatures." Captain Ho did not move. He was not a large man, but there was something in his eyes that made people follow him. He had fought in the border wars. He had buried friends on 6 different planets. He had seen things that would break most people, and he had never surrendered. He looked around at his crew, 340 people, tired and wounded and far from home. They looked back at him, waiting. "Creatures," Ho said quietly. "They called us creatures." He walked to the main viewport and stared at the alien fleet. They were beautiful ships, he had to admit. Smooth and curved, glowing with strange light. They looked like gods. "Lieutenant," he said without turning around, "what do we know about their formation?" Checked her readings. "They are spread wide, sir. No defensive pattern. Their shields appear to be down. They are not treating us as a threat." Ho smiled. It was a small smile, but had seen it before. It was the smile he wore before he did something crazy. "They made a mistake," he said. "Blinked, sir." "They made a mistake," he repeated. He turned to face his crew. "They think we are weak because our ship is damaged. They think we are afraid because we are small. They do not know us. They do not know what humans do when we are cornered." He walked back to his command chair and sat down slowly. "All hands, battle stations. We are not surrendering today." And across the cold void of space, they waited, laughing and joking, not knowing that they had just made the worst mistake in the history of their species. The one cycle passed and they did not surrender. High Commander was not angry, he was amused. These creatures wanted to play. "Send 3 ships forward," he ordered. "Warrior will lead a boarding party. Take them alive if possible. I want to study what kind of fools would refuse the Dominion." Warrior was the best soldier in his fleet. He stood 8 feet tall, covered in battle armor that had never been scratched. He gathered 200 of his elite soldiers and prepared to board the human ship. They carried plasma rifles, energy blades, and personal shields that could stop any projectile. They had conquered species that breathed fire and species that could bend metal with their minds. One broken ship full of soft creatures would be nothing. 3 warships moved forward in a triangle formation. They approached slowly, savoring the moment. On the Eternal Victory poured himself a drink and prepared to watch the show. But on the Captain Ho was not waiting, he was moving. "Lieutenant, target the asteroid field behind the enemy fleet. Fire all rear missiles on my command." Looked confused. "Sir, the asteroid field is behind them. Our missiles will not hit the enemy ships." "I know, fire." "Press the button." 20 missiles flew past the 3 approaching ships and slammed into the asteroid field. The explosion sent thousands of rocks spinning into space, creating a wall of chaos and debris behind the enemy fleet. On the Eternal Victory, Sub-Commander jumped from his seat. "What are they doing? They missed us completely." Scholar watched the debris field spread across their escape route. A cold feeling grew in her stomach. "They did not miss. They are blocking our retreat." Before anyone could respond, they did something impossible. Chief Engineer Park had worked miracles. He had pulled power from life support, from lights, from heating systems. The crew was breathing thin, cold air, but the engines roared to life with power they should not have had. They turned and burned directly toward the lead ship at maximum speed. "They are attacking," said his voice rising. "They are actually attacking." Laughed, "Let them come, 1 ship against 3, they are committing suicide." But Lieutenant was not flying in a straight line. She threw them into a spiral, using the debris from the asteroid field as cover. Weapons fire missed again and again, hitting rocks instead of the human ship, and they kept coming, faster and faster. On the lead ship, the captain finally felt fear. Raise shields now." Too late. They did not fire its weapons. It did not need to. Captain Ho had given an order that no commander would ever give. He told his crew to brace for impact. Then he rammed his ship directly into the vessel. The collision was terrible. Metal screamed against metal. The forward section of the crumpled like paper. But the human crew had already retreated to the reinforced core of the ship. And when the 2 vessels were locked together, Park detonated the explosives they had placed in this damaged bow. The ship exploded from the inside. On the Eternal Victory, silence fell across the bridge. His drink slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He had just watched these primitive creatures destroy one of his ships by crashing into it. They had hurt themselves to hurt him. He had never seen anything like it. But the battle was not over. Warrior and his soldiers had already boarded through the breached hull. They moved through the dark corridors, their weapons ready, expecting to find terrified creatures hiding in corners. Instead, they found Sergeant Major Sung. Sung was not a complicated man. He had grown up on a farming colony. He had joined the military to protect his family. He had lost that family in the border wars, and now the only thing he had left was his crew. He stood in the darkness of the corridors with 50 Marines at his back. They had no plasma weapons. They had no personal shields. They had rifles, knives, and homemade explosives built from engine parts. And they had something they did not understand. They had rage. The first soldiers came around the corner, their armor glowing with energy. Sung pressed a button, and the electromagnetic pulse he had built went off. Every shield failed at once. Their advanced weapons went dark. For one moment, they stood confused in the silence. Then the humans attacked. The fighting was close and brutal. Soldiers were stronger and faster, but they had never fought in darkness against enemies who did not care about dying. The humans used the ship's corridors against them, forcing the tall aliens to crouch and stumble. They used grenades in tight spaces, accepting wounds to inflict them. They fought with a fury that they could not match. Warrior pushed forward, killing 3 humans with his bare hands. He was unstoppable, a perfect soldier, but his troops behind him were falling. They had trained to fight armies, not shadows. They had conquered species that surrendered when the battle turned. These humans did not surrender. They kept fighting even when they were bleeding. They kept fighting even when they were dying. On the bridge of the Eternal Victory, Scholar watched the data from soldiers. Life signs were disappearing one by one. She turned to High Commander with wide eyes. "They are not fighting to survive," she whispered. "They are fighting to make us lose." Stared at the burning wreckage of his ship, at the debris field blocking his fleet, at the impossible little vessel that had just killed hundreds of his soldiers. And for the first time in his long life, he felt something he did not recognize. He felt doubt. On the Captain Ho wiped blood from his face and looked at the status reports. His ship was dying. Half his crew was wounded, but one ship was destroyed and the boarding party was being pushed back. He opened a channel to his crew. "This is the captain. Well done, but we are not finished yet." And somewhere in the dark corridors, Sergeant Sung smiled and loaded his last magazine. The aliens had expected prey. They had found something else. They had found humans. High Commander was no longer laughing. He stood on his bridge, watching the wreckage of his destroyed ship drift through space. The 2 other forward ships had retreated, their captains reporting heavy losses from the boarding action. The primitive creatures had killed over 150 soldiers in close combat. This was not possible. This was not how the universe worked. "All remaining ships attack formation," commanded, his voice cold with fury. "No more games, no more boarding parties. Destroy that vessel completely. Leave nothing." 9 warships moved forward as one. Their weapons powered up, glowing with enough energy to crack a planet. This time, there would be no mistakes. But there was already gone. Captain Ho had ordered the ship into the atmosphere of the nearby gas giant. The massive planet's storms and radiation made sensors almost useless. They could detect the human ship, but barely. Every time they locked weapons, the signal disappeared. "They are hiding," Subcommander said, frustration in his voice. "Like animals in a hole." Scholar shook her head slowly. "No, not hiding, waiting." She was right. Deep in the swirling clouds of the gas giant, Captain Ho called his senior officers together. The ship was in terrible condition. Chief Engineer Park reported that the engines could fail at any moment. They had perhaps 6 hours of power left. Lieutenant calculated that even with perfect tactics, They could destroy maybe 3 more enemy ships before they died. Ensign spoke up quietly. "Sir, I managed to send a distress signal before they jammed us, but I do not know if anyone heard it. We are very far from home." Ho nodded. "Then we plan for no rescue. We plan to fight alone." He pulled up a map of the gas giant's atmosphere on the flickering display. Storms raged across the screen, massive cyclones bigger than Earth itself. "This is protocol," he said. "We use the planet, we use the storms. We hit them and disappear before they can respond. We make them chase us into hell." Studied the map. "Sir, flying in those storms will tear our ship apart. Their ships are not built for this environment either, and they do not know these storms. We have been watching, we have been learning." He pointed to a specific pattern in the clouds. "Here, and here, these are the killing zones." The plan was simple. The would appear from the clouds, strike fast, then dive back into the chaos before they could react. It was desperate. It was suicidal. It was the only option they had. But Ho added one more element to the plan. He turned to Ensign. "Open a broadcast on all frequencies. Every ship needs to hear this." Looked confused. "What should I broadcast, sir?" Ho smiled. "Music." Minutes later, every ship received the same transmission. It was not a surrender. It was not a plea for mercy. It was a song. Old human war music, drums and voices rising together in patterns that they had never heard before. The sound filled their bridges, their corridors, their sleeping quarters. It was not beautiful to them. It was terrifying. It was the sound of creatures who sang while they killed. On the Eternal Victory screamed at his officers to shut it off. But the humans kept broadcasting, mixing songs with silence, keeping the off balance. Then the struck. The first attack came from below, rising from the deepest clouds where no one expected. Human missiles flew true, striking a cruiser in its engine section. The ship did not explode, but it lost power and began to fall into the planet's gravity. 800 died as their vessel was crushed by atmospheric pressure. Before the fleet could respond, they was gone, diving back into the storms. The second attack came an hour later, from a completely different direction. This time, the humans targeted a supply ship, destroying the fleet's reserve fuel. Without that fuel, its remaining ships could not chase the humans forever. The clock was now working against both sides. They tried to follow, but the gas giant's storms were brutal. One cruiser flew too deep and was damaged by lightning that made their lightning look like sparks. Another lost navigation in the magnetic interference and nearly crashed into a third ship. They were the greatest fleet in the galaxy, but they were fighting an enemy who knew how to lose. Although the cost was terrible, each attack brought new damage. Park reported fires in 3 sections. 17 more crew members were dead. The ship was held together by emergency patches and desperate prayers. Sergeant Sung came to the bridge, his uniform covered in blood. Most of it was not his own. He had finished the last of the boarders. Warrior was dead, killed in hand-to-hand combat in the engine room. Sung had lost an eye in that fight, but he had won. "Boarding party eliminated, sir," he reported, his voice tired but steady. Ho looked at his old friend. They had served together for 15 years. "How many Marines left?" 12, sir, out of 50. The number hung in the air. 38 Marines dead, fighting aliens who should have been unstoppable. Ho put his hand on Sung's shoulder. "They will remember what you did here. They will remember what we all did, sir." Outside, the fleet regrouped. They had lost 3 ships now, 3 ships to a broken human vessel with primitive weapons. Scholar worked frantically at her station, trying to understand how this was happening. She analyzed human physiology, their tactics, their strange music. She found the answer in their history. These creatures came from a world of death, a planet with crushing gravity, extreme temperatures, and predators everywhere. They had survived by never giving up. They were what her people called persistence hunters. They did not need to be faster or stronger. They just needed to keep going until their enemies collapsed. She brought her findings too. He listened in silence. "So they will not surrender," he said finally. "No, High Commander, I do not believe they know how." Looked out at the gas giant, where somewhere in those storms, a dying ship full of strange creatures was preparing to attack again. "Then we will have to kill them all," he said, "every single one." But even as he spoke the words, he wondered if that was even possible. Scholar stood before the command council on the Eternal Victory. The surviving captains of the fleet watched her with expressions mixing anger and confusion. They had lost 5 ships now. 5 ships to a single human vessel that should have been dead hours ago. "Explain," High Commander demanded. "Explain how this is happening." Activated her display. Images of Earth appeared, the human. It was a beautiful planet, blue and green, covered with water and life. It looked peaceful. It was not. "Their planet has 17 different climate zones," began. "Temperatures range from extreme cold to extreme heat. The gravity is strong enough to crush weaker species. The atmosphere contains a corrosive gas they call oxygen, which slowly destroys metal and flesh alike. They breathe it." The captains shifted uncomfortably. "Their world is filled with predators. Large creatures with claws and teeth, small creatures with venom, invisible organisms that invade their bodies and kill them from within. They call these diseases. They have millions of them." Sub-Commander interrupted. "How did they survive?" "By refusing to die," said simply. "Their bodies are weak compared to most species. They cannot run fast. They cannot fight with natural weapons, but they have one gift that no other species in our records possesses. They are pursuit predators. They do not catch their prey through speed. They follow it, for hours, for days, until it collapses from exhaustion." She changed the image to show human history, wars, battles, conflicts stretching back thousands of years. They have been fighting each other since the beginning of their species. They have perfected the art of killing, but more importantly, they have perfected the art of not surrendering. Leaned forward. "Every species surrenders when defeat is certain. It is logical, it preserves life." "Humans do not share this logic," said. "I have intercepted their communications. They have a concept they call fighting spirit. It means continuing to fight when victory is impossible. They believe that defeat is not final as long as they are still standing. And they believe that making their enemy pay a terrible price is a form of victory, even in death." The room was silent. "They do not need to win," concluded. "They only need to make sure we lose." On the Captain Ho gathered his surviving crew. 187 people stood in the main cargo bay, the only section of the ship still fully functional. They were exhausted, wounded, and far from home. The ship around them groaned and sparked. It would not last much longer. Ho looked at their faces. Some were young, barely adults. Some were veterans with hair and old scars. All of them had fought harder than anyone should have to fight. "You know our situation," he said. "The ship is dying. Help may not be coming. There are still 6 enemy ships out there and they are coming for us." No one spoke. "I will not order you to fight, not this time. This is a choice each of you must make for yourselves." He paused. "If you wish to surrender, I will open a channel to the. Perhaps they will show mercy, perhaps not, but at least you would have a chance to live." He let the words settle. "Or we can fight. We can make them bleed for every meter of this ship. We can show them that humans do not go quietly into the dark." He raised his hand. "All those who wish to surrender, raise your hands now. There is no shame in wanting to live." The cargo bay was silent. 187 people looked at their captain. Not a single hand moved. Ensign, the youngest officer on the bridge, spoke first. "We are with you, Captain, to the end." The others began to speak, their voices overlapping. Agreement, determination, rage. The sound grew until it filled the cargo bay, a roar of defiance that shook the walls. Ho felt his eyes grow wet. He blinked it away. Then we fight. Lieutenant approached him after the crowd dispersed to their stations. Her face was pale but calm. I have a plan, sir, but you will not like it. She showed him the calculations. If they overloaded the reactor and aimed directly at its flagship, they could take the command ship with them. The explosion would kill them all, but it would destroy the enemy's heart. Without their high commander, the Dominion fleet would fall into chaos. Ho studied the numbers. It was a good plan, a final plan. Prepare the reactor, he said quietly, but wait for my order. Nodded and left. The rose from the gas giant's clouds one last time. 6 ships surrounded it immediately, weapons locked. There was nowhere left to run. The storms had bought them time, but that time was over. On the Eternal Victory smiled coldly. Finally, end this. But before his ships could fire, something happened. New signals appeared on every sensor. Energy signatures, massive and powerful, emerging from faster-than-light travel. 3 of them. Subcommander shouted in alarm. New contacts, 3 vessels coming in fast. The shapes materialized in space behind the fleet. They were human ships, but nothing like the Broken. These were warships at full strength. Their hulls gleamed with armor. Their weapons hummed with power. Their names were painted on their sides in human letters. 3 Republic battlecruisers, each one bigger than any ship present. On the ensign was crying and laughing at the same time. Sir, our distress signal, they heard us. The communications channel crackled with a new voice, strong and clear. This is Captain Shin of the. We received your signal and came as fast as we could. What is your status? Ho found that his hands were shaking. He gripped the arms of his command chair to steady them. This is Captain Ho. We are damaged but operational. 187 crew still alive. We have engaged the enemy and destroyed 5 of their ships. 6 remain. There was a pause on the other end. Then Captain Shin's voice returned, filled with respect. 5 ships, you magnificent fools, hold your position, we will take it from here. Ho allowed himself to breathe. Then he opened a channel to the flagship, to High Commander, who was now staring at his display in disbelief. You wanted to meet humanity, Ho said, his voice steady. Now meet our fleet. Outside, the 3 battlecruisers turned toward their weapons beginning to glow. The hunters had just become the hunted. The battle turned in seconds. The 3 Republic battlecruisers moved with perfect coordination, their weapons systems targeting the fleet with deadly precision. The fired first, its main cannon sending streams of superheated plasma into the nearest enemy ship. The vessel's shields held for 3 seconds before collapsing. The ship exploded in a flash of light. High Commander screamed orders at his captains, but chaos had taken hold. His fleet had expected to hunt weak prey. Instead, they were facing predators bigger and stronger than themselves. 2 more ships tried to retreat toward the debris field, but the cut off their escape. Its missiles tracked them through the asteroid fragments and struck true. Neither ship survived. On the Eternal Victory, Subcommander grabs arm. High Commander, we must retreat. We have lost half our fleet. Shook him off violently. Retreat? To tell the Dominion that we were defeated by primitives? Never, he turned to his weapons officer. All remaining ships focus fire on the lead human vessel. If we destroy their flagship, we can still win. The 3 remaining ships, including the Eternal Victory, turned their weapons toward the. Combined energy beams struck the battlecruiser's shields, which flared and bent under the assault. The shuddered but held its position. And while they focused on they forgot about the. Captain Ho watched the battle from his dying ship. His vessel could barely move, but it still had weapons. It still had a crew, and it still had one final contribution to make. Lieutenant, he said calmly, target the Eternal Victory's engine section. Give me everything we have left. His fingers flew across her console. The remaining missiles launched in a desperate spread, crossing the battlefield in seconds. The flagship's shields were facing the wrong direction, focused on the missiles struck unprotected hull. The Eternal Victory lost propulsion instantly. The great ship began to drift, powerless and wounded. Fell to the floor as his bridge shook violently. Alarms screamed around him. His officers reported damage to every system. The engine was gone. Weapons were offline. They were dead in space. Scholar did not wait to see what happened next. She ran to the escape pods, her research data clutched to her chest. Sub-Commander tried to stop her at the doorway. "Where are you going? We must die with honor." Looked at him with pity. "Someone must tell the Dominion what we learned here. Someone must warn them about what is coming." She pushed past him. "Stay and die if you wish. I will live and I will remember." Her escape pod launched just as the finished its approach. Captain Shin did not waste missiles on the crippled flagship. He gave one chance. "Vessel, this is the Republic battlecruiser. Your ship is disabled. Surrender now and your crew will be treated with honor. You have 1 minute." On the Eternal Victory, High Commander stood alone on his ruined bridge. His officers were dead or fleeing. His fleet was destroyed. Everything he had believed about the universe had been proven wrong in a single day. He thought about surrender. He thought about living as a prisoner of these strange, terrible creatures. Then he thought about the 17 species he had conquered, the civilizations he had destroyed, the millions who had surrendered to him and been shown no mercy. "Never," he whispered. He pressed the self-destruct sequence. The Eternal Victory exploded in a ball of fire. The blast caught one of the fleeing ships too close, destroying it as well. When the light faded, only one enemy vessel remained, desperately trying to jump to faster-than-light speed. It disabled its engines before it could escape. The battle was over. The final count was terrible on both sides. Of the 12 warships that had arrived expecting easy conquest, 11 were destroyed. Only Scholar and a handful of survivors in escape pods remained. They had paid a heavy price. Of the 340 crew members who had started the battle, only 114 survived. 226 names would be added to the memorial walls back home. Captain Shin brought the alongside the broken. Rescue shuttles crossed between the ships, carrying wounded crew members to proper medical facilities. Engineers came aboard to stabilize the dying vessel. After hours of work, they managed to restore enough power to tow the home. Captain Ho refused to leave his ship. He stood on the bridge as workers moved around him, watching the stars through cracked viewports. Lieutenant found him there, her arm in a sling from a wound she had ignored during the battle. "Captain, the medics want to see you." Ho shook his head. "Later, I need to be here." Understood. She stood beside him in silence. "Do you think they will come back?" she asked finally. Ho considered the question. "Yes, they are a proud species. They will not accept this defeat easily. They will return with more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. Then we will be ready." He looked at her and smiled. It was a tired smile full of grief and pride. "Yes, we will." Months later, Scholar stood before the Dominion High Council on her. The great chamber was filled with the most powerful leaders of the species. They had summoned her to explain how 12 warships had been defeated by a broken vessel and a handful of reinforcements. She told them everything. The death world called Earth, the persistence hunters who never stopped, the fighting spirit that burned even in hopeless situations, the strange creatures who sang while they killed and smiled while they died. When she finished, the eldest council member laughed. It was a dry, ancient sound. "You expect us to fear these primitives. We have 1,000 ships. We have conquered 100 worlds. We have crushed species far more powerful than these humans." Shook her head slowly. "With respect, Elder, you have never faced anything like them. You asked me what humans have. They do not have our ships. They do not have our weapons. They do not have our centuries of conquest." She paused, remembering the sound of human war songs echoing through communications, remembering the image of a broken ship ramming into a vessel 10 times its size, remembering the look in Captain Ho's eyes as he promised to fight to the end. What they have, she continued, is each other, and they never stop fighting for that. The council dismissed her words as the ramblings of a traumatized survivor. They began planning their revenge, gathering fleets, preparing for a war of extermination against this new species. But Scholar knew the truth. She had seen it in the burning wreckage of her fleet. She had heard it in the voices of dying soldiers who could not believe what was killing them. They had conquered the galaxy because no one could stand against them. Now they had found someone who would. Back in Republic space, the crew of the was honored with the highest medals their government could give. Captain Ho stood at a memorial service and read 226 names aloud. Each name was a person who had given everything. Each name was a hero. Behind him in orbital, workers were already building a new ship. Its hull gleamed with fresh armor. Its weapons were the latest designs, and painted on its side in letters 3 meters tall was a name that would become legend. Aye aye. The war was coming. They would return with all their fury. They would bring fleets that darkened the stars. They would bring weapons that could crack planets. But the humans would be waiting. They would be ready. And when the moment came, they would do what they had always done. They would fight, and they would never ever surrender.